Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a specific combination of classes that somehow, and I don't understand how, somehow in my near 1 year of making videos on this channel, making Baldur's Gate 3 builds, and nearly 180 videos, I somehow haven't made a Bardbarian, the Bardbarian subclass, multi-class mix, I should say. Yeah. I don't know how I managed to do that either. I suppose in the past, I never really thought I could create an interesting combination with it. I mean, I figured most people would already have done that combo, and what exactly could I bring to the table as far as that's concerned? So I guess I just left the concept. And then every time I would kind of return to the idea and think, hey, maybe I'll give this a go, I could never really decide on exactly how I wanted to build it, what the leveling scheme was going to be, which subclasses I was going to use. Because I will say, with the setup that I'm showing here, with the kind of level ratios and the equipment, you can do any combination of subclasses. All of them will work to some great effect and still kind of get the vibe off. The version I'm going to be showing today is what I think to be, in my opinion, the most fun and probably one of the more powerful variants. Maybe not the most powerful, I mean, obviously Wildheart Barbarian would be the most powerful, but you get the point. I think this specific combination I'm going to be showing off with the equipment and such that I have is going to be quite fun. In my opinion, it felt like a really, really badass playstyle that I really, really enjoyed. But, however, I will say, and you will know if you kind of look in the description, that there is a little bit of finagling you have to do with the stats on this one to make it, as playable as it can be. In my testing for this build, I had a total of 16 strength, which isn't bad, but for Act 3, it could be a bit troublesome. I didn't have any problem in my testing, because Barbarian is just a very, very strong class generally, and Bard absolutely helps with that. But I would definitely recommend picking up 2 specific buffs with this build. The Potion of Everlasting Vigour in Act 2 to make your strength an 18 total, which is perfect. Or use Potions of Potions of Hill Giant Strength. Instead, if you don't mind kind of managing that resource, that would probably be the most optimal way to play this. And I would absolutely pick up in Act 3, which I never ever really recommend, but for this build, I do think it might be worth it, the Mirror of Loss to give a +2 to, if not your Charisma, one of your other stats. I believe the Mirror of Loss works that you can get like a +2 in Charisma as a base, and then you can get a little bit more, but definitely want that, maybe that +2 Charisma. You may be able to do some finagling with Ethel's Boon as well if you really wanted to go out of your way, but I think that only really works if you go for the Potion of Hill Giant Strength strategy. So the version I'm going to be showing in this build is technically the least powerful version of it, with a bit of optimization and picking up some other items throughout the game, which unfortunately I can't really do in good time. I can't really play through the whole game, and mods are a bit weird for adding stuff like that. But what I'm showing here, basically, like I say, is the weakest version of this build, which is still extremely strong. So if you feel like the build looks like it's slightly underperforming in this video, trust me, it's not. It's still extremely strong, more powerful than a lot of my other builds, and has room for improvement if you just make the correct decisions as you go throughout the game. I would also, even though I didn't use it in my testing, because I try to avoid using Illithid powers on every build if I can help it, but actually I do think things like Psionic Overload could also really work nicely for this build, so you might want to pick up the Awakened passive to be able to use them as a bonus action and such like that, because this build will be obviously a little bit bonus action heavy just because of Rage and all that, but I do think that with a little bit of optimization, a little bit of adding things on, you can make this a seriously strong build, even stronger than it already is. But anyways, with that little preamble out of the way, I'm pretty sure you will be seeing the combat footage at the moment, so you can already see that the build performs quite bloody nicely. Let's get into it. So, the thing is playing a Barbarian, we definitely want to make sure that we're getting everything we want flavor-wise right off the bat, so I actually think that starting off as a Bard makes the most sense. Where if we were to multi-class into Barbarian, we're still going to be getting pretty much everything that we want anyway. I'm not as worried about getting con save proficiency, which Barbarian would normally get, because we're not really going to be concentrating on spells as much, because you can't enrage anyway. So, I mean, there's a few other things as well to consider, like if you wanted to maybe get the higher base hit die if you went with Barbarian first, but I do think starting off as Bard still gives us everything we want. When we multi-class in the Barbarian, we're going to get all the weapon and weapon proficiencies that we need and unarmored defense and all that. So I feel like we might as well just grab, the various different skill proficiencies from Bard to start with, because I do think it makes a bit more sense to go that route. So we're going to kick things off as a Bard. First up, we're going to get to cantrips. Obviously, Vicious Mockery and Friends are my go-to. The fun part about playing this build is you are going to be playing a Bard with very decent charisma. And it will be decent charisma throughout the game. Not the best, but decent. But if you've never played as a barbarian who is the face of the party with like the intimidation checks and such, it is so funny. A lot of the barbarian social stuff in this game is actually extremely fun, so I definitely recommend giving it a try. Next up for our spells, I've got some weird options here. We're going to have Speak of Animals. You can take this off if you decide to go with Wild Heart Barbarian, because obviously they get that for free, and replace it with something else. But if you're not going to go with that, like I won't be in this video, you can pick up Speak of Animals here to still get that extra bit of dialogue option there. We also have access to Dissonant Whispers, which is just going to be a nice psychic spell that can frighten our enemies, because barbarians are pretty goddamn terrifying, so I think it makes sense to have something like this. Next up, Longstrider, a buff that's going to remain in our rage, because it doesn't require our concentration, lasts until your next long rest, so you can just cast this on yourself and the whole party and just get that bit of extra movement speed, and as a barbarian, we love movement speed. And finally, Heroism. Obviously at level 1, we're not going to be able to rage, so I'm going to consider this almost a bit of a magical rage. Sort of a, like, pseudo-rage, if you will. It prevents us from being frightened, which is great, as well as being able to gain 5 temporary hit points each turn, so we get a little bit of extra tankiness. So until you reach level 2, which is, you know, like 5 minutes after leaving the Nautiloid, you'll kind of have this sort of not quite a rage, but actually a rage. Not really a rage. You get my point. It's meant to be kind of like a tankiness buff that you can get even at level 1. Next up, starting instrument. Honestly, choose whatever you like, but I went with the lute. I went with the lute. I went with the... Game, what the hell was that? Oh, the scuff begins. Let's go. So anyways, on to ability scores. And yes, this is a bit weird. We've got strength at 16, and we're not really going to be putting ability score improvements into that as we level up, so it's going to be staying there until you get the Potion of Everlasting Vigour in Act 2. Dexterity and Constitution are both at 14. Again, not as high as I would like, but with Barbarian's overall tankiness, having these stats be at this level is actually not a huge deal. Next up, Intelligence and Wisdom are both at 8. Unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles in order to get these stats to work. As much as I don't like having Wisdom at 8, we don't really need Intelligence, but those Wisdom saving throws can be a bit gnarly, but I do have a way of patching that up in a moment. We also have Charisma at 14. Again, even though it is our main spellcasting modifier, we're not actually going to be spellcasting a huge amount over the course of this build, because obviously, again, rage. But I do intend to have this build finish itself off with basically having 2 modes, a spellcasting mode and a rage mode that you can use interchangeably. So Charisma is not going to be staying at 14. We are going to bump that up, like I say, with the Mirror of Loss. By the time that, if you're at the end of this build, if you use the Mirror, you should have about an 18 in Charisma, which is very, very, very solid. Next up, skill proficiencies. As a Bard Orc, we do actually get a lot of really fun stuff. I've gone with the Entertainer background to pick up Acrobatics and Performance. Because we're an Orc, we get Intimidation. You don't have to play an Orc, feel free to play something else, but Orcs kind of work for this build. Again, I've kind of gone for like a metal band member type of vibe here. Obviously, the build is called Powermetal for a reason. You know, I've got like the eyeshadow around, like the makeup around the eyes, and like the long hair and the beard, and you know, it's fun to play with character design. But we do get to pick up a few other things, namely Deception and Persuasion. Now we are pretty much perfect at dialogue. We're going to be really, really good in roleplay as the face of the party, which is exactly what I was looking for. I've also gone for Sleight of Hand, specifically because I think Sleight of Hand is a good representation of your ability to maybe dexterously play an instrument. I know Performance is there, but Sleight of Hand, you know, helps with that, you know, being able to move your fingers in weird ways and such quickly and efficiently. So your ability to play the guitar or the lute or what have you allows you to also pick locks and such, and pick things out of people's pockets. I mean, it just kind of comes naturally with the territory. Feel free to choose something else. Now, as for the progression of this build, it's entirely up to you kind of what you want to go with. You have to choose what you want to prioritize. Do you want to prioritize the Bard stuff, or do you want to prioritize the Barbarian stuff? As far as I'm concerned, we've got pretty much most of the Barbarian stuff that I think would be good for this build. We've got things like Vicious Mockery, we've got the Bard Identity. As much as level 2 of Bard at this point would be nice, obviously, for the Song of Rest and all that, which you can absolutely go for if you so desire, I do want to get straight into the Barbarian levels as quick as possible, so we're going to do exactly that. So, multiclassing immediately into Barbarian, which is there. We're going to gain access to Rage, allowing us to give up our spellcasting ability in order to deal extra damage with our melee and improvised and throwing weapons, as well as taking resisting physical damage, so taking a bit less there. We also gain access to unarmored defense, which means now we can wear clothing, which is going to be a huge part of this build, because guess what? We are wearing clothing. Not much else to discuss here at level 1, so let's keep going. Oh, although I will say, here we go, simple and martial weapons and shields. We gain all of those proficiencies. Next up, at Barbarian level 2, we're going to get Danger's Sense, meaning that we have advantage on dex saves against traps, spells, and surfaces, which is a great feature to have. Fireball is not going to be that deadly to us anymore. Also, Reckless Attack, one of the best features in the game, giving us advantage on attack rolls, but enemies have advantage on attacks against us. Overall, it's a pretty decent trade. Barbarians are so tanky that they don't really care about getting hit, so even with Reckless Attack up, we're not going to be taking that much damage, which is perfect for us. Next up, at Barbarian level 3, we get to choose our subclass. Now, I'll go over kind of each of the options quickly and kind of give my justifications for why you should or shouldn't pick them. First off, Wild Heart, and of course, the various hearts that come with it. Any of these can be good. Bear Heart, if you want to be insanely tanky. Eagle Heart, if you want to do jumping strikes. Perhaps it's like one of those crowd surfing things, but instead of surfing on the crowd, you're chopping them in half. Next up, Elk Heart, being able to move faster and get a charging attack. I could kind of see this one, but it's not my personal favourite. Tiger Hearts, of course, if you wanted to make their heart, give them bleeding hearts, because you're such an amazing musician, or, you know, you just literally make them bleed. I mean. And finally, Wolf Heart, to give the rest of the band a bit of a boost. Overall, my personal choice would be Bear Heart for obvious reasons, the extra healing, as well as being able to resist all damage types except Psychic. It's just too good to pass up a lot of the time, so if you want to go with that, I totally get it. Next up, Berserker. Overall, pretty damn good class as well, giving you bonus action attacks that you can use even if they do apply a penalty. Reckless Attack can help offset that, and also being able to throw as a bonus action as well. We don't have any way of like making a weapon return to us, we're not using a returning weapon here, so that might not be as advantageous to you, but if you wanted to kind of pump up your strength to the max and make this a throwing build, you technically could, but at that point, you're just playing another kind of standard throwing Barbarian build, which I've done before. So I don't really recommend Berserker for this build. What I am going to go with is, of course, Wild Magic. We're mixing a Spellcaster and a Barbarian. Let's get a bit of Spellcaster from our Barbarian too. Barbarian's Wild Magic Rage is going to allow you to trigger a Wild Magic Surge that's different from the Sorcerers. You get some other effects, and pretty much all of them are positive. I think at worst, one of them is like a neutral effect that's kind of like, it could be good, it could be bad. Most of them are good and beneficial to you. Things like teleporting, summoning explosive flumps, being able to add force damage to your attacks, deflecting spells, increasing your AC. There's a ton of interesting and useful effects here that play perfectly into this kind of chaotic, like heavy metal, power metal barbarian thing that we're going for here. Just graciously teleporting across the battlefield, swinging your weapon to the rhythm. Like, there's so many cool things you can do with this here, and don't worry, I've got a decent amount of teleportation in this build. It's quite fun, but Rage Wild Magic is absolutely what I want to go for here. It also comes with the ability Magical Awareness, which is... You can spend your bonus action to make anyone within range of 3 meters around you have proficiency bonus to saving throws against spells. I mean, it's okay, but it's definitely not something I'm going to be wanting to spend my bonus action on that frequently, especially when it's so limited as it is. It only lasts one turn. Well. So, at Barbarian level 4, you've got a choice to make. You're going to take an ability score improvement, but where you want to put it is entirely up to you. You can either put it into Strength, combined with the Potion of Everlasting Vigour. That's going to get you up to a total of 20 Strength, if you want to maximise that out. You could also go for Dexterity if you want to up your ability score, up your armor class, and as well as giving you a slightly better initiative. Or you could go for Constitution, which would be my personal pick. That's still going to give you a bump to your AC thanks to unarmored defense, as well as giving you more HP to work with. There is that 14 Charisma sitting there, but we're not really focusing on Bard levels at the moment, so I don't think we need to bump up that stat just yet. Next up, at Barbarian level 5, you're going to gain access to extra attack and fast movement, so just a bit of extra movement, and now we are a full martial fighter as well. Now that we have that 5th level of Barbarian, you could take the next 2 levels of Barbarian now, but I think we'll come back to those later. I want to grab some of the Bard stuff now, since we kind of have our full Barbarian kit now that we have extra attack. So, let's move on to Bard, giving us Jack of all trades and Song of Rest, both of which we love, as well as access to another spell. And since we are playing a Bard and we're going to be playing an instrument, and the whole thing is like powerful strikes and that, let's get Thunder Wave in order to make a strum of our instrument so powerful that it knocks enemies away with the sound wave. It just makes too much sense. Next up, at Bard level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and in a similar fashion to Barbarian, there's pros and cons for taking each, so let's have a look now. First up, College of Law, which comes with the very, very enticing ability, Cutting Words. Cutting Words is going to make it so that we can use our Bardic Inspiration to impose a debuff on enemies by insulting them, as opposed to using Bardic Inspiration the normal way for buffing our allies. This is a very, very fun idea for a Barbarian, because obviously being able to use Cutting Words to verbally insult your opponents while you're fighting as a Barbarian is just absolutely hilarious. But of course it also comes with the caveat that College of Law is a bit more focused on spellcasting. If you were to take Bard to level 6, you would gain access to magical secrets, giving you a few more spells to work with, like in the case of this build, something like Shield, which can be used while raging, because reaction spells can be cast while raging, for some reason, probably an oversight. So technically there would be a reason to go College of Law, a pretty decent one at that, not to mention you get the extra proficiencies and expertise by going with College of Law, meaning that you could actually be a very, very effective party face. But of course, the fact that it's mostly spellcasting focused on a Barbarian build is a bit of a downside, so you'd really have to pick and choose when you want to rage, and sometimes making the wrong decision at the wrong time could cost you a battle, so you do have to be a bit careful. Next up would be College of Valor, a very, very respectable choice, and is definitely a nice middle ground between the two other subclasses, because you're still going to get your full martial capability, you're going to gain access to a few more weapon proficiencies, including medium armor now, which we didn't actually get from multiclassing Barbarian, so you would get that here, as well as you'd still get those expertise as well, because that's just part of this level of Bard anyway, and you'd also get Combat Inspiration, which means that you'd be able to add weapon damage or armor class to your allies' Bardic Inspiration die options. Very, very good. Used it in my last build, the War Song, so you could definitely use this one if you so desire. But of course, you know what I'm gonna pick. College of Swords. College of Swords gives us everything we could possibly want for a martial build while still playing a bard. We're going to gain a fighting style, and I am using a two-handed weapon here, but you could go for a one-handed weapon for dueling and throw on a shield, or you could go for two-weapon fighting and dual-wield weapons with this build, which would totally make sense. If you're going to play this with a finesse weapon, maybe taking a 1-level dip into Monk instead of a 7th level of Barbarian to make everything Dex, you could actually go for a pretty powerful dual-wielding Dex build with this, using some versatile weapons, maybe if you picked up dual-wielder or something like that. There's a lot of opportunities to kind of mess around with the different weapon types you could use with this build. I wanted to go for a two-handed great axe because, again, I'm kind of inspired by, Jack Black and the like, where, what was the video game called that he was in? The one where he was playing as the metal guitarist whose guitar was like an axe, like that sort of thing, right? But so there's a ton of different ways you could go about this. If you wanted to go for like a dual-wielding build, you absolutely could, making getting a bit more use out of that bonus action. So College of Swords is going to give you a huge amount of versatility with its fighting style choices. You're also going to gain access to the obviously overpowered sword flourishes, which means you're going to be able to do 3 different types of special attacks with either melee or ranged weapons, but deal additional damage equal to your Bardic Inspiration, consume your Bardic Inspiration on use, but have various effects. Slashing Flourish allows you to attack up to 2 enemies in front of you at once. Defensive Flourish will allow you to increase your armor class by 4 if you hit, and Mobile Flourish will allow you to knock an enemy away and then teleport to them. All of these work within range, they're not considered spells, so you can make full use out of these. More damage is always just great on its own, but the extra effects are just icing on the cake. Defensive Flourish is probably my favourite to use overall with this specific build. We have a lot of other options for being able to teleport around the map, so Mobile Flourish is not as valuable unless you really want to push that enemy away from you. Defensive Flourish is giving us a flat +4 to our armor class. It's going to be extremely valuable for when enemies try to attack us. And Slashing Flourish can also be pretty good if you need to get rid of those multiple enemies. And I've not included a ranged weapon on this build, but if you decide to do so, the ranged Slashing Flourishes are also really, really good. They all do the same thing, with the exception of Defensive Flourish. Where is it? Defensive Flourish. Yeah, what is it? Slashing Flourish ranged. That's what I meant to say. With Slashing Flourish ranged, it says attack up to 2 enemies at once. That is true, but with the restriction that melee weapons have, you have to slash 2 enemies in front of you. But with Slashing Flourish ranged, you actually just get to pick 2 targets to shoot no matter where they are. Or you could pick the same target twice, just dealing an extra 2d6 damage, which is a hell of a big buff. That's like Rogue's Sneak Attack. So, overall, extremely powerful set of skills here. I mean, if you've been on this channel long enough, you know what College of Swords does. Anyways, for our spells, we do get to pick another one, and I'm going to pick Blindness. Blindness is a non-concentration option that means we can cast it before we go into range and still get the benefits. We can blind a creature, and for 10 turns, attack rolls against them have advantage, and foes attack, and that foe attacks with disadvantage. Just basically taking an enemy out of the fight, in all honesty. Really, really powerful ability. Again, we can use this as an action and then rage as a bonus action to just completely debilitate one of our foes, not only just for us, but for the whole party, because while we still get advantage on attack rolls through reckless attack, our allies most likely won't unless you're playing an all-barbarian party. So this is actually a really nice spell to have, and just, again, it makes you more tanky by default by making the foe attack with disadvantage. So yeah, I would definitely pick up Blindness here. And for that fighting style, pick whatever. Next up, at Bard level 4, you are going to be able to choose your next feat, and at this point I would say take the ability score improvement, and again you have a choice. I've mainly taken buffing and support and utility spells here, so I might not actually need my charisma to be that high, so if you want to throw those extra points into dexterity or constitution, it's entirely up to you. With the equipment that we have, we are going to get a bit of a buff to dexterity, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Constitution could be another nice buff. Again, if you really wanted to push that strength to 20, you could here, but I'm just going to take that buff to charisma to make us a bit more all-rounded. A jack of all trades, if you will, which, you know, it's kind of what Bard is known for. Next up, we do get another spell, cantrip even, pick whatever you like. And we also do get another spell, you can pick whatever you like here, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to go with Shatter, kind of leaning into that thunder theming that we went for earlier. Next up at Bard level 5, we're going to get the main things that I want from Bard at this point. We're going to get Font of Inspiration. Now our Bardic Inspiration die, it recovers on a short rest, which is great, which means we're going to be able to use those resources much more often. As well as now our Bardic Inspiration bonus is now bumped up to a D8, meaning that now all of our flourishes are going to do an extra D8 of damage instead of a D6, which is huge. We also do get another spell at this point, and we do get to pick a level 3 option, so I'm going to pick Glyph of Warding. Again, it's another non-concentration option that we can cast as an action before we rage as a bonus action, setting up a big elemental trap on the field that can either explode immediately as soon as the enemies turn hostile, or they can walk into it if you place it in a strategic place during combat, and it does a pretty sizable chunk of damage and can do multiple effects. Sleep, pushing people away, and various elemental damages. So you've got a few options here. I think this is one of the better overall utility spells that we can cast with this restrictive setup. Now, you could go to Bard level 6 here. It would allow you to pull up an extra spell for your spell list, but honestly, the benefits don't really make sense in a Barbarian build. For example, we would get extra attack here. Cool, except we already have it, and this version of extra attack does not stack, unlike the Warlock one, so unfortunately, you're not going to get any benefit really from going to level 6 or beyond of Bard here. Technically, if you went to level 7, you could get level 4 spells, but again, I'm not sure how many of those would exactly be useful for this setup, so I think I'd much rather go the Barbarian route to get more HP and a bit more tankiness. By going to level 6 Barbarian, we do actually get a bit of synergy. We're going to get access to Bolstering Magic Boon, allowing us to spend an action to essentially gain Bless, a minor version of it, for 10 turns, which is kind of nice. But we also do gain the ability to recover level 1 or 2 spell slots, which means we can refuel our spellcasting side of things, which is a nice bit of synergy. We also do get an additional rage charge, allowing us to rage one more time before our next long rest. And finally, at Barbarian level 7, we're going to get Feral Instinct, giving us a +3 bonus to initiative and the inability to be surprised. That +3 bonus to initiative is going to be really, really nice to help patch up our middling dexterity, so that we're going to still be able to act quite quickly in battle, so I find it quite valuable. But again, if you're really not worried about that feature and the extra bit of HP, there are a few one-level multi-class dips you could take. Fighter, for a fighting style, if you so choose. War Cleric, for bonus action attacks. What else could you do? You could do Monk, like I say, if you want to go for a dexterity weapon-based build. Rogue, if you decide to do Finesse for the extra sneak attack damages you could get. There's a bunch of different things here you could pick up. I mean, hell, if you really wanted to, grab Wizard for spell scribing and you could pick up more utility spells. There's a ton of different options here that you could go for. But of course, I'm going to be going with just straight up Barbarian 7 because I want Feral Instinct. And that is the build. What you're going to be getting out of this overall is pretty much, like I say, a jack of all trades. The best of both worlds. You're going to get a little bit of the kind of utility spells and the roleplay potential that comes with playing a bard, which is always nice. You're going to get the incredible amount of tankiness and martial capability that comes from playing a barbarian. Yes, our stats, without the extra buffs, like I said, that I discussed at the beginning of the video, are a bit middling across the board, but once you kind of optimize and play this build out through an actual playthrough, it's going to feel really nice. The progression is going to feel lovely. Aside from the 1 level delay on extra attack, which you would have gotten which would have been the same if you just played the straight swords bard up to level 6 anyway. So getting extra attack at level 6 with Barbarian is not a huge deal, but just being able to play a Barbarian with that bit of bard flavor throughout the game is going to feel really, really nice. And again, all you need really is maybe even just 3 to 5 levels of Barbarian, and you're going to feel like you're playing a complete character anyway, regardless of before you even get into the more deep multi-classing stuff with Bard. And then once you get to level 3 of Bard, and then eventually level 5 of Bard as well, you're just going to have all of the great stuff. Song of Rest, the flourishes, everything. You're going to feel like a proper badass fighter, being able to use your wild magic surges to do all sorts of crazy effects, including teleportation and all that other stuff, and then just being able to do absolutely massive amounts of damage with the blade flourishes in combination with everything else. You're going to feel like an absolutely insane, graceful martial fighter, and it's going to feel extremely fun. But let's get into the equipment, like I said. So with the equipment, you're going to have access to quite a few different things that are going to help bolster various aspects of the playstyle. First up, my main weapon of choice, the Hellfire Great Axe. By the time you've reached Act 3, your musical proficiency is so incredible that when you shred on your guitar axe, it literally causes flames because you're playing so quick. You're doing like the Through the Fire and Flames solo. This axe comes with a d12 of base damage like all axes, but it also comes with an extra 1d6 of fire damage. And whenever you deal damage with this weapon, you gain turns of heat. I like to think of this as like Guitar Hero's like star power mechanic, where you're just getting better and better as you play, and you like get the extra bonus points. But for us, it's extra damage, so it's just a little bit extra for us. You guys all know how heat works at this point. We also gain access to Hellflame Cleave, which is a massive fire attack that can bypass resistance and immunity to fire, as well as giving us an extra bit of fire damage on top. Unfortunately, though, this is counted as a cantrip, meaning that you cannot use this while raging. So you're going to want to attack with this before you rage, maybe open combat with this on your opening turn, do a big slash with this, and then rage afterwards. It's just how you open your show, baby. It's how you start the performance. You always got to hook them in right at the start. But of course, up until then, you actually have a couple of options as you progress throughout the game. In Act 1, I'd recommend the Bloodied Great Axe. Nothing too special, it's just a +1 Great Axe that you can get early on fairly easily. It comes with the kind of little bonus that if you're at less than half your HP, you deal a little bit of extra damage. So that's kind of cool. But in Act 2, you can pick up the Defender Great Axe, which whenever you make your first attack of the round, you can reduce this weapon's enchantment by 1, so going from a +2 to a +1 to increase your armor class and saving throw bonus by 1. Fun little mechanic that you can play around here, and easily obtainable in Act 2, but then you upgrade to the Hellfire Great Axe in Act 3. No ranged weapon specified, like I said, but feel free to throw whatever you like in this slot. Next up, our headpiece, the Bone Spike Helmet. This is just pretty much one of the best Barbarian pieces of equipment in the game, and I felt like it worked quite nicely. When you rage, hostile creatures within a 3-meter radius must succeed a wisdom saving throw or take a 2 to 8 psychic damage. The target receives half damage on a save. You gain a +2 to intimidation, which is great, making our intimidation skill checks with our barbarian levels and all that, especially if you go for the expertise in intimidation, which I highly recommend you did. I forgot to show that off earlier. But you're also going to get menacing attack, one of the fighter weapon maneuvers from Battlemaster Fighter, and it does not cost any resources. You can just do this once per turn, over and over and over again, getting an additional extra bit of damage on all of your attacks, as well as having the ability to frighten your target, similar to how we get with our bards like Dissonant Whispers and such like that. So it felt very, very on theme with the build. Again, bards do psychic damage and inflict frighten, so getting the ability to do this as a barbarian just felt very, very on theme. As well as the fact that, again, it kind of plays into that, like, opening the performance thing, where you start off with Hellflame Cleave, and then your rage deals, like, psychic damage around. It's just, like, this big explosion of power. Then you also get your Wild Magic Surge on top of that. You're just going to feel like you're powering up like it's Dragon Ball. It's going to feel amazing. But, of course, Act 3 option. An early game option, I mean, you can't deny the absolute swagger of the Cap of Curing. It basically just means whenever you use a Bardic Inspiration on an ally, they also gain a little bit of healing. It's just going to give you a little bit of utility even while you're raging, because again, we're not taking those Bard levels till a bit later, so just having a fun little thing that's going to keep you stylish, as well as being able to get that little bit of extra utility out of your Bardic Inspiration in those early levels is going to feel quite fun, but feel free to swap this out for whatever you like. Next up, I've just got the Cloak of Protection here. Why not? We need all the AC we can get. Next up, the Graceful Cloth. This is going to give us a +2 to Dexterity, bringing us to a total of 16. Thanks to Feral Instinct, that is going to give us a bit of a buff to our initiative rolls. So overall, we're going to be doing pretty well there. We're also going to gain a +1 bonus to our dex saves and increase our jump distance. So being able to jump around the map as a barbarian is always quite fun. So I've decided to go with this one. However, if you'd rather trade those dexterity points out for strength points, you could go for the Mighty Cloth instead if you didn't want to put those ability score improvements into them. This would increase your strength score by 2 to 18 for us, but if you have the Potion of Everlasting Vigour, that will be a 20. You also gain advantage on saving throw on strength saves and cannot be restrained, which is great. Oh no, sorry, you gain advantage on saving throws against being restrained, and you cannot be pushed against your will. I'm having trouble speaking today, my apologies. Next up, we also have Bull Rush from this piece of equipment, giving you a charging attack. So if you want a bit more flavour in that perspective, you could go with that, but I do think the Graceful Cloth will be better overall. Next up, our gloves, the Wondrous Gloves. This increases our armor class by 1. That's it, just increases your armor class by 1, that's pretty damn good. But in addition, it gives us an extra use of Bardic Inspiration, meaning that we have a total of 5 per short rest, which is huge. That's 5 flourishes with the extra bonus armor class, and the fact that you can get this pretty much right away in Act 1. Too good to pass up. In fact, most of these are obtainable pretty early on. I think Cloak of Protection is Act 2, but it's quite early into Act 2, so you've got a lot of good options here in the early game to really get the build going. And finally, for our boots, we have the Helldusk boots. You cannot be forcibly moved by your foes, spells, or actions, and you ignore the effects of difficult terrain. Pretty damn good, especially for a barbarian. And when you fail a saving throw, once per long rest, you may spend a reaction to just succeed it instead. Yeah, why not? You also gain access to Hell Crawler, which is going to allow you to teleport in as a bonus action once per short rest, getting a slightly shorter range version of Misty Step, but it does do a 2 to 16 fire damage impact where you land. This will also hurt you, so be careful. But again, it's all about that showmanship, teleporting onto the stage in a ball of fire before you start shredding on your axe guitar and that lights on fire. There's a lot of fire in this build, okay? Look, I think it felt like a very cool bit of flavouring. It's just an overall powerful piece of equipment, but you can swap it out for something else if you like. And a good early game option, which you could keep for the whole game, is actually the Boots of Speed, just giving you the ability to dash as a bonus action and provoke disadvantage on opportunity attacks against you when you do. Barbarians love maneuverability. They want to get up close and personal with their enemies, and this is going to let you do that pretty damn consistently. As for the accessories, I've gone for the Amulet of the Harpers, giving us advantage on wisdom saving throw checks, which helps patch up that 8 wisdom, as well as giving us the ability to cast shields on ourselves once per long rest. Remember, reaction-based spells can still be cast while raging, so we do get to use shield with this build. Again, you may have some other ways of getting shield as well. Perhaps if you went with a shield on this build, you could go with the Shield of Shielding to get another usage of shield. There's a few different ways you could go about it. Maybe if you wanted to go the light armor route, you could wear the elegant studded leather to get shield that way, just in case you want a bit more spell casting, but it might not be optimal. Next up, we have the Ring of Blink, one of my favourite rings to use on a barbarian because Blink works during rage. With this ring, we only get access to it once per long rest, but that's usually all you need. You want to save it for a tougher encounter anyway, because what Blink is going to do is that at the end of your turn, you can roll a d20, and on an 11 or higher, you vanish into the ethereal plane where you cannot be harmed, and then you can do a short teleport afterwards, kind of near where you blinked, to appear somewhere else, and then immediately start attacking again on your next turn. I think this makes perfect sense for a wild magic, trickery, teleporting Bardbarian. You basically just get to give yourself even more tankiness on top of your already existing tankiness, being able to just not get hit at all, and then when you do get hit, you resist most of the time. So I think Blink is just an extremely fun spell that I recommend for this build. And then finally, this is a throwaway slot, feel free to put whatever you like in here, but I quite like the Ring of Jumping, being able to quickly cast Enhanced Leap on ourselves as a bonus action, once per short rest, to triple our jumping distance. If we use this in combat, this is going to mean we're delaying our rage by a turn, but that doesn't really matter, because again, just being able to get Enhanced Leap, which again, doesn't require our concentration, so it'll work during rage, just being able to hop around and pretty much get to anywhere on the battlefield to just start slamming foes is going to be so fun, dashing and jumping and doing all that. It's going to feel like such a fun playstyle. Dashing, jumping, teleporting, hitting really hard, then blinking out of existence, teleporting again, raising our AC, pushing enemies away, attacking multiple enemies at once. You can do it all with this build, and the setup during combat is going to feel so fluid and fun. You're going to have a great time in both roleplay and in combat, being able to do pretty much everything, and it's just going to be a great time. The combat footage will be playing now, and as you've already will have seen at the start of the video, this build has no issues. It really, really doesn't. It tanks really well, it hits really hard, Bard, it's going to deal with some of the more difficult encounters in the game, and if you follow the leveling scheme that I showed in this video, you will be able to feel a pretty decent progression as you go throughout the game. It's going to feel great to play. You're just going to be starting off as a Barbarian with that little bit of bardic flavour, then you get the powerful Bard stuff a bit later on, and then with kind of the end game sort of content, you're going to just be absolutely wrecking everybody. Extremely fun build. I really, really like this one. I think it's a fun bit of flavouring. I think it's a fun bit of, you know, gameplay loop with the teleporting and all that. I think you are just going to have a really, really good time with this one overall. Anyways, as for end of video stuff, there's not too much to discuss at the moment. We're actually going to be coming up on the 1-year anniversary of me uploading Baldur's Gate 3 content pretty soon. It's going to be around the 4th of September, I believe. And also, of course, this Saturday, if you haven't seen the teaser or the advertising I've been doing for it, Heart of Avernus is happening this weekend, my one-shot D&T session set after the events of Baldur's Gate 3. It's like a what-if one-shot where the gang go into Avernus to fix Karlach's heart. It's kind of inspired by the epilogue where Karlach was talking about finding a forge and such like that. I uploaded a teaser, I believe it was earlier this week or earlier last week. I can't remember. Either way, feel free to go have a look on the channel for the Heart of Avernus teaser if you want to learn more. We're doing this in support of charity, Fibromyalgia UK, which the host of the charity event, my friend Red, she obviously suffers with it herself, and so she's raising money for the charity to help people who have the condition. As well as the fact that I myself are working to support the charity as well, obviously by doing the one-shot and a few other events kind of around the kind of event as well. So feel free to head over to a Twitch channel where you can see all that going on. And please come see Heart of Avernus, because if you donate a bit of money, you'll get to inflict wild magic effects, which we all created together on a live stream. So I hope to see you all there. Right, that's enough rambling and ranting to let the combat footage finish. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.